I found out I wasn't invited to Christmas while sitting in my downtown Chicago apartment, still wearing the soft cream-colored silk blouse I'd worn to a morning meeting. The fabric felt warm against my skin, oddly comforting, which is more than I can say about the sharp sting that hit my chest when my phone buzzed. At first, I thought it was a holiday greeting. A simple, "Merry Christmas, Ava," or maybe a snow-covered picture from my aunt. Instead, it was a photo from my cousin Jenna, a photo that clearly wasn't meant for me. My family crowded around the dinner table, and sitting right there with them, laughing, drinking eggnog, wearing those tacky red Santa hats my mom loves. The debt collectors, the same men who used to bang on our door, the same ones whose voices once made my mother cry in the kitchen, the same ones whose threats kept me awake at night, until I somehow paid off every last dollar for a family that now pretended I didn't exist. My thumb hovered over the screen. For a second, everything went silent, except the faint hum of the heater and the distant honking from the snow-covered street below. I blinked, letting the absurdity sink in. So this was how they repaid me. Not a thank you, not an invitation, not even a seat at the table I saved. A soft laugh escaped me, half disbelief, half heartbreak. "Of course," I whispered, staring at the photo. "Of course they did." And just like that, the past I'd been avoiding knocked on my door again. The last Christmas I spent with my family was 3 years ago, back when I still believed that love automatically meant loyalty. Back when I thought blood ties were unbreakable. I remember standing in our old living room in Dayton, Ohio, a narrow space filled with mismatched furniture, faded curtains, and the smell of burnt cinnamon my mom always managed to produce when she tried to bake. I was 23, barely making enough to cover my own rent, but somehow already expected to shoulder everyone else's burdens. That night, Dad paced the room like a storm waiting to hit shore. "Ava, you don't understand," he snapped, slamming a stack of overdue notices on the coffee table. "They're coming back next week. They said this time they won't be so friendly." Friendly, right. As if threats counted as friendliness. I swallowed, feeling that familiar pressure in my throat. "I can help a little," I whispered. "But I don't have much." Mom's disappointed sigh cut through me deeper than any insult. "Then what good are you, Ava? You're supposed to be the responsible one. Your sister has kids, your father is exhausted, and we're drowning." Responsible. That word always tasted like metal. Heavy. Cold. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the letters. The amount owed felt impossible, like staring at a cliff with no place to land. "I'm trying," I said softly. But no one heard me. Instead, the shouting continued, my dad blaming me for leaving home too early, my mom insisting I owed them because they raised me, my older sister Taylor claiming I had it easy since I didn't have children. I felt myself shrinking, folding inward, becoming the quiet girl they preferred over the woman I was trying to become. The only person who truly saw me back then was my grandmother, Nana Rose. She lived 2 blocks away, in a tiny apartment that always smelled of lavender and warm tea. The night after the fight, I went to her trembling. She didn't ask questions. She simply wrapped me in her quilted arms. Then she handed me something. A small silver locket with a single pressed daisy inside. "For courage," she said. "So you remember that you deserve a life that doesn't hurt to live." Her voice cracked, just a little. That night, I made my decision. I packed my bag, kissed Nana goodbye, and walked into the freezing Ohio air with nothing but determination and that little silver locket clutched in my palm. It was the first time I chose myself, and the last time I let my family break me. Starting over at 23 in Chicago wasn't glamorous. It was loud radiators, cheap instant noodles, a mattress on the floor, and a part-time job at a coffee shop where the espresso machine hissed louder than the customers complained. But it was mine. My life. My rules. I still remember my first morning there, steam rising from a chipped mug, the city rumbling awake outside my tiny studio apartment. I touched the silver locket around my neck, feeling its cool weight against my skin. For courage, Nana had said, and I needed every ounce of it. During the day, I wiped counters and poured lattes for people who didn't bother learning my name. At night, I sat in the public library until closing, teaching myself digital marketing from free online courses. I wrote notes until my fingers cramped. I practiced designs and cold messaged strangers offering to build websites for whatever they could pay. Sometimes just $40, sometimes nothing. Most nights, I fell asleep with my laptop open, the blue light still glowing against my face. But one evening changed everything. It was late, almost 10 p.m., when a woman walked into the coffee shop just as I was stacking chairs. She wore a navy wool coat, red lipstick, and the kind of confidence that turned heads without trying. Her name was Marissa Blake, founder of a small but growing interior design firm. "You're Ava, right?" she asked. I blinked. "Yeah, can I help you?" She smiled. "Your manager showed me the newsletter you made for the shop. Clean, elegant design. You did that." I nodded, feeling my cheeks warm. "I'm looking for someone with an eye for detail," she said. "Someone hungry. Someone who works hard even when no one's watching. Interested in a chance." I could barely breathe. "Yes," I whispered. "Absolutely yes." Marissa became my first real mentor. She wasn't soft, but she was fair. She pushed me hard. She taught me how to pitch clients, negotiate contracts, and present ideas with confidence instead of apology. For the first time, someone saw potential in me without turning it into a debt I had to repay. There were still struggles. Nights when my laptop screen blurred from exhaustion. Days when self-doubt gnawed at me. Moments when I almost dialed home, but didn't. They never asked how I was doing anyway. But slowly, things shifted. My work improved. My client list grew. One month, I made enough to move out of the tiny studio into a modest but sunlit one-bedroom apartment. I bought a proper bed, a real table, a little plant I named Daisy after the locket. Then came the moment that changed everything. My first big corporate client. My hands shook as I signed the contract. Not because of the amount, though it was more money than I'd ever seen, but because I realized I was doing it alone, on my terms. After 2 years, I wasn't just stable. I was successful. And when I learned through a frantic voicemail from my mother that the debt collectors were back and furious, I did the one thing they never expected. I paid it off. Quietly. Completely. No announcement. No lecture. No demand for gratitude. I didn't even tell Marissa. I just transferred the money, sat on the floor of my apartment, held my locket, and breathed. They never asked where the miracle came from, and I never volunteered the truth. Because some successes are easier to celebrate alone. The confrontation didn't happen the way I imagined it, not with shouting or slammed doors. It unfolded quietly, almost politely, on a snowy Tuesday afternoon. My company, Morgan and Blake Creative, had just moved into our new office space, a renovated brick loft in Chicago's West Loop with tall windows and warm oak floors that still smelled faintly of fresh varnish. Elegant framed prints lined the walls, mock-ups from our biggest campaigns. A soft amber glow from modern floor lamps painted everything gold. It was the kind of space people walked into and instinctively lowered their voice, like they'd stepped into a place where big decisions were made. Marissa was out at a client meeting, and I was reviewing proposals when my assistant buzzed me. "Ava, you have unexpected visitors." I frowned. "Who?" A pause. "Your family." My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed calm. "Send them to the conference room." The moment the glass doors slid open, I saw the shock ripple across their faces. Mom froze first, her hands gripping her oversized purse. Dad blinked like he was trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Taylor, my sister, looked everywhere except in my direction, her eyes tracing the chandeliers, the leather seating, the marble coffee table with our company logo etched in metal. "So this is yours?" Dad finally asked, his voice stiff. I stood beside the long walnut table, spine straight, hands folded. "Yes," I said. "Welcome to my office." Mom's jaw tightened. "You could have told us you were doing well." I offered a small, controlled smile. "You never asked." The tension in the room settled between us like fog. They took their seats hesitantly, their eyes darting around the room as if expecting someone richer, older, more legitimate to walk in and claim it instead. I sat across from them, crossing my legs, smoothing the soft charcoal fabric of my dress. My heart was calm, steady. For the first time in years, I felt like the adult in the room. Dad cleared his throat. We need to talk about the debt." "What about it?" I asked. Taylor leaned forward, arms crossed. "Those collectors said someone paid everything off. They said it wasn't them and it wasn't a mistake. We thought maybe." Her voice dropped. "Maybe you knew something." I watched their faces, the confusion, the unspoken hope that maybe someone else had saved them again. "I paid it," I said simply. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Mom's eyes widened. "You? But how?" "You never." "I didn't tell you," I replied softly. Because every time I tried to help before, it was never enough. And every time I pulled away to focus on myself, you called me selfish. So I stopped explaining. I just did what needed to be done. Dad leaned back, stunned. You paid everything? All of it. Yes. Taylor swallowed hard. Why didn't you say anything? I held her gaze. Because the last time I said I wanted to build my own life, you all made it clear how little that meant to you. You only saw me as someone who was supposed to fix things. Their eyes shifted away, one by one, as the truth landed. Mom's voice cracked. Ava, we didn't know you were capable of. You didn't believe I was capable. I kept my tone calm, not cruel. You never asked what I was doing, where I lived, how hard I worked. You just assumed I was the same girl you could guilt into anything. The room felt smaller now, warmer, charged. I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim folder, financial summaries, proof of payments, timelines. I set it gently on the table. That, I said, is the truth you came looking for. They stared at the folder like it was glowing. And one more thing, I added. After all I did, after every sacrifice you never acknowledged, you still didn't invite me for Christmas. Instead, you hosted the men who once threatened your home. So tell me. I leaned in slightly, my voice quiet but razor sharp. Why are you here now? Their expressions collapsed. Guilt, shock, quiet shame, all mixing in a way I had never seen before. In that moment, the power shifted, fully, irrevocably. And for the first time in my life, they finally saw me. Dad was the first to speak. His voice, usually booming and authoritative, sounded small. Ava, we didn't mean to hurt you. Things got out of hand. We were overwhelmed. I picked up my pen, turning it slowly between my fingers, not fidgeting, just thinking. I understand being overwhelmed, I said. I lived it for years. The difference is, I didn't take it out on you. Mom pressed her lips together, eyes shiny but still defensive. We didn't invite you because we didn't want you to see us struggling again. A humorless smile tugged at my mouth. But you invited the debt collectors? Taylor flinched. I exhaled softly and sat back in my chair, feeling the quiet strength settle in my spine. Listen, I'm not here to punish you. I'm not here to make you grovel. But things cannot go back to how they were. They exchanged unsure glances. I'm willing to stay in your lives, I continued. But there will be conditions. Mom blinked. Conditions? Yes. Boundaries. Rules. Accountability. Whatever word helps you swallow it. Dad's brows furrowed. What kind of conditions? I folded my hands on the table, palms steady. First, I said, no more financial dependence on me. None. I helped because I wanted to. I am not a bank. I am not a backup plan, and I will never be your crisis solution again. Taylor's face twisted slightly. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Second, I added, you start therapy. All of you. Individual, not group. You need it. And I say that without judgment. We've all been carrying generational pain, guilt, blame, and none of you ever learned how to process it. Mom bristled. Therapy? We're not. It's not optional. I cut in gently but firmly. If you want a relationship with me, you deal with the past instead of throwing it at me. Dad nodded slowly, surprising me. All right, he murmured. If that's what it takes. I wasn't finished. Third, I said, turning to Taylor. You stop comparing me to yourself. Or to anyone. I'm not responsible for your choices, or your kids, or your marriage. I love my nieces, but I will not be guilted into carrying your burdens. Her eyes filled with tears, real ones, not the manipulative kind I'd grown used to. I didn't know I was doing that, she whispered. You did, I replied softly. But now you know. And now it stops. A long silence followed, thick, heavy, but not hostile this time. More like a room full of people finally forced to see their own reflections. Lastly, I said, letting my voice soften but not weaken, you treat me with respect. Not as a safety net, not as the responsible one, not as the fixer, but as Ava. As a woman who built her life brick by brick with no applause. Mom covered her mouth, a sound escaping her, half sob, half regret. We failed you, she whispered. For a long time, I answered. But you have a chance to do better. Dad's eyes lifted to mine, old and tired but sincere. And if we do, he asked. If we try, really try, what happens then? I gave a small, genuine smile. Then we start over, I said. Not as the family who broke me, but as the people willing to rebuild with me. For the first time in years, The room didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like a beginning. The weeks that followed were quieter, gentler than anything I expected. At first, I waited for them to slip back into old habits. Guilt, blame, the familiar emotional tug-of-war. But something surprising happened instead. They actually tried. Mom sent me short, awkward texts after therapy sessions. Not long paragraphs, not dramatic monologues, just honest things like, "Today was hard, but I'm learning." Dad started taking evening walks, something his therapist encouraged. Sometimes he'd send a picture of a sunset over the Ohio River, as if he was slowly letting the world soften him. Taylor called once a week, not to complain, not to unload, but to talk. About her girls, about her job, about how she was working on her own patterns. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And in the middle of all that slow, careful rebuilding, I grew too. One snowy morning, I stood by the tall window of my office, fingertips lightly brushing the silver locket around my neck. The pressed daisy inside had faded, browned around the edges, but it still felt like the same fragile burst of courage Nana gifted me. For courage, she'd whispered. I finally understood what she meant. Courage wasn't loud. It wasn't a single moment of rebellion or a grand gesture. It was the quiet decision, made every day, to choose the life you deserved. To walk away when you needed to return on your own terms. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. Marissa peeked in. "You all right?" she asked. I smiled. "Yeah, actually, I am." She stepped inside, her heels clicking softly on the oak floor. "Your family seems to be trying." "They are," I said. "And so am I." She nodded knowingly. Healing goes both ways. I looked around my office, the warm light, the framed work, the plant named Daisy still thriving on the shelf. Everything here was built from nights I cried quietly, mornings I forced myself up, moments I doubted I was enough. But I did it anyway. As Marissa left, I turned back to the window. Snowflakes drifted slowly, catching tiny sparks of light as they fell. For the first time in my life, the future didn't feel heavy. I opened the locket and looked at the worn daisy inside, my chest swelling with a mix of gratitude and pride. "I made it, Nana," I whispered. I really made it. The city shimmered below, a reminder of every step I had taken to rise. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't the girl who fixed everyone else's mess anymore. I was the woman who rebuilt herself, piece by piece, boundary by boundary, breath by breath. And I choose my own seat at the table now.